Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar today. I'm Francis Seeley from Global Net 21 and Enfield Voices, and this is one of the regular interviews we do. And today we're going to look at an organisation that's been around in Enfield in London, North London, for something like 25 years, and it's the Enfield Women's Centre. And they do a great deal of work in a whole sort of variety of different ways. And we're going to talk to Ginnie Newby Landon today about the work they do. Anyhow, Ginnie, thank you, for joining us. And I know you're pretty busy and you've been very, very active. And I also know you've got a code. So thank you for coming on, in the circumstances. But let's start by just talking a bit about the Women's Centre. It's been going now for 25 years. But how did it all begin?
It actually started in the 80s. There was 1980s. There were a group of women at the then Middlesex Poly who were experiencing violence, and they got together, and it was the amazing Vicky Scarlett, who was head of learning resources there, who got them to meeting, and the building was then given over to the group to use indefinitely for women's stuff. But it wasn't actually called Enfield Women's Centre at that time. It wasn't until 1991 that the group was first registered as a charity. I first came in here in early 94 with a friend from Middlesex University. I was doing a double in women's studies and English, somewhat ambitious, I thought. And we came here to find out. I live 0.7 miles from this building, and I didn't know, having lived there since 1970 something, that there was a women's centre in the borough. So it was interesting. And that's how it grew. Very shortly afterwards, I was joined by Barbara Lefebvre, who's the current chair. She's been all sorts of people here. And like me, that includes chief cook and bottle washer. We started off by having an open day in September 94. And the lovely Rita Smythe opened it for us. She was the mayor at the time. And we had a questionnaire asking women what sort of services they wanted, because people often put on services they think people need.
I'll tell you what, let's go through all the services in a minute, because we'll go through it step by step. Just tell us a bit about Vicky Scarlett, because I know that all of you were quite sort of, in admiration of her for the way she started it and developed it. And I know she's no longer with us, but maybe you'd like to say a bit about her.
Oh, it's hard to talk about Vicky. Personally, loved her. She was fierce. She was uncompromising, brutally honest, and a real support to me personally. I know, in addition to doing the stuff here, she did. She started off in this room learning yoga to the old Richard Hittleman program, I think. And then she became qualified, and then she provided yoga courses around the borough. And I have this abiding memory of this amazing woman cycling around Enfield with her henna red hair, going from yoga class to yoga class. And it's hard to talk about Vicky without. Okay. I know, because we went to her funeral and stuff. Packed. People loved her. She was very open. She made everybody feel welcome, and you never felt less than when you were with her.
Okay, so she was the inspiration to start it, and she developed a group of women who were interested in.
For a couple of years after I came here.
Yeah, well, tell us about you coming there. I mean, were you interested in sort of gender issues and women's issues before? Or did you get really inspired when you sort of found out about the centre and what it did?
I was born into a family with 7 boys out in India, where my mother was practically deified for having given birth to 7 males. My sister, 9 years later, once yelled at mums were invisible, and it felt like that sometimes. I don't blame mum at all, because of her upbringing. So I always felt that I was actually born to be interested in gender issues, especially when we came to England and I got to do all the shopping, all the cooking, all the washing up. So I started to get interested that way, but it sort of transcended that. I was also brought up within the Catholic Church, which gave a very particular view on women's roles and, you know, aspirations. We could be brides or the other thing. So as I got older, I got more and more interested in what was happening. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I decided I was going to go to university and actually put some sort of structure to my emotional responses. And that was when I did the joint women's studies and English thing. And, you know, I haven't looked back since then. I only came here for a little while and it kind of sucked me and see me away.
So you're really truly in it now when you got away from the idea of brides and other things. Not sure what the other things are, but we could go into that maybe. But you started in the 1980s, but you went into a bit of a lull, didn't you? And then there was a resurgence in the 1990s. What happened to make that sort of revitalization take place in the 1990s?
Well, that was when Barbara and I arrived here in '94. And then we didn't know what to do. The phone kept ringing and we kept looking at each other and thinking, what do we say if they want help? We held an open day. We got lots of advice from Enfield Voluntary Action. The people who were there at the time were Claire Whetstone and Karen Hart. They were brilliant. And we had this open day where we gave everybody a questionnaire to complete, telling us what they felt they needed. We gave some prompts on it, but we left lots of spaces for people to write what they need themselves, because we believe very firmly in people self-defining and being able to access what they want. And we found that most of the people wanted counselling, affordable, and the other things, help with confidence and assertion and stuff like that. So it was really fortunate that from a previous existence in youth, doing voluntary youth work, I knew the amazing Val Bean, who came, you know, I sort of somehow inveigled her into becoming part of the team here. And we started to do those courses. We got, at the same time as people saying they wanted counselling at that open day, we had a number of women coming to say they were either qualified or training and were looking to volunteer here. So that was a sort of congruence that we could not, using counselling power lines, that we could not ignore. So we set that up and we launched it in January or February '95, and we've been members of the BACP, British Association of Counselling and Psychology. Slap me if I do that again, since 1995.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, things began to take off when you got there and you developed lots of services and you've got other people in. If you were to define the main services you offer, what would you say they were?
I think counselling is very important, because giving people support in a way where it's just for them and they are, you know, the prime focus of the person offering the support. Not many of us feel we can get that, and it's certainly not available to us at no cost or very low cost. I think the most we've ever had as a donation towards counselling is £10. We've found that economics should not get in the way of people getting the support they require and need. Following that, there was also the business around confidence building, which is essential. And we've seen lots of things being advertised, come along and do a half day on confidence building or half day on assertion. Our courses were 12 weeks long. You've spent years working on those beliefs about yourself. You need a bit of time and a bit of support to work through them and identify them without thinking that you're wrong, but, you know, understanding how you got there.
So counselling is a major part of what you do. And that counselling, I mean, what's the main issues in counselling? Is it domestic violence? Is it mental health? Is it the need for people to get out and meet people and they want to know how they do that? I mean, what are the main issues that confront you when you do your counselling?
Right. A few years ago, before the Jimmy Savile thing, the clinical supervisor, Hilary Ratner, great woman, and I were talking, and she said she had figured out that almost 90% of our counselling clients then had disclosed sexual abuse or incest, as part of their experience. That's now moved on. There's a lot more support around for people in those situations, and violence is a major issue for women. We get a lot of women coming with, we call it domestic violence. The government call it violence against women and girls. And it includes all forms of violence, coercive control, economic control, so there's a lot there to work with. So the domestic violence thing is important. We're concerned about that here. There's also a lot of people who have issues around bullying at work or at home, relationships, repeating patterns of behavior. So rather than judging them, we hope to help them to find a way to recognize what they're doing and maybe even why they're doing it.
So
to know why, just as long as they.
So when people come to you,
but it does help.
Yeah, I'm sure it helps. But when they come to you with a particular problem, have you got the staff there, the volunteers to help, or do you have a number of organisations that you can also refer people on to? I mean, if for example, if it's domestic violence, do you know refuge centres and people experienced in that?
Yeah. Women come here because they don't want to go to some of the more established places because they feel a lot of women, especially women who are newer citizens, concerned that the state will intervene and take their children away if they are deemed to not be coping. Come to a place like this, hoping to have that. We are very clear that we do not respond. The only response we give for anyone who's been referred here, and this is to the courts as well, who do refer people, is that the women are attentive whether or not they're engaging in the work. They can sit in a room and eat a packet of crisps, and we will tell the court that's what they did. And, we tell them that's going to do.
I mean, that's really interesting because lots of people would be afraid to go to the state because they're afraid their children will be taken away, as you said, and they then may end up in a children's court. And of course, they're almost a law unto themselves. I mean, you can't interfere with them, you can't name names. So how do you help someone who is afraid that their children will end up in court or get taken away? Can you give them the initial support before the next stage happens?
We support them here. We give them the counselling, if that's what they need, therapeutic counselling. We also have access to accommodation that's outside the system until they are in a stronger place and feel able to cope with the system. It's not a lot. It's just one dwelling, but that's what that level of need is not that high. But we work with them. They do our courses. We offer the Freedom Program, which is recognized as being really useful. It's over several weeks. We repeat it every term. Women can start halfway through the course and carry on until they've completed the following term. And each model deals, it's a standalone module. So, they can do them and miss a couple of weeks as partners get a bit anxious about where they're going on a regular basis, and things like that. So it allows people to come along. Many women are afraid to report as well. Some women don't report because they don't believe that they're experiencing domestic violence. Yeah. One woman just in the last couple of weeks said she didn't think that's what she was experiencing. It was her children who were in their late teens who reported it, not her.
Gosh,
that's
amazing.
She thought that's what happened in a marriage.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've heard that story again and again. So, I mean, that's a case study that you've just given us of what happens, children reporting. I mean, do you have any other interesting case studies you can tell us about that sort of gives us some idea of the depth of the problem that you deal with?
Ooh, wow. There are so many, but the thing, how to do it without them being recognised, because these are local people. We had a woman whose daughter, adult daughter, had a major issue with food. She had had 4 missed pregnancies, 4 pregnancies that ended too soon. And she was in her 5th one. She was in hospital for complete bed rest. The mother spent all her time cooking food and taking it to the hospital and sitting and feeding it to her. The mother suffered with what is called major depressive disorder, which means that, she's quite entrenched in the sad part of her life. It doesn't mean that she's not going to get out of it, but it's quite difficult. She also had an issue with the benefit system, and she was sanctioned. She sold nearly everything in her home to keep supporting her daughter through that period. We didn't know that later, and when we did, people rallied round and helped her. But to get the citizens of ICE, whom we love working with them because they are really good, and these are not legally trained, so can't do that. But we challenged her sanctioning, and she got the money back. But we'd gone through a lot of hassle.
So universal credit is one of the topics or one of the issues that you deal with a lot.
It's the impact of universal credit. We try not to say the word because we're not supposed to swear in this building.
Well, we said you could, and I'll cut it out. But no, don't do it. No, don't.
Okay, well, I'll try not to. It is a system that is for people. It's not. And it's proven, so I'm not saying anything that's not known out there. We've got a woman whose husband deserted her after 20 years of marriage, left her with 5 children. And then suddenly, as a bolt out of the, she suffers dreadful depression, they cut her benefits completely, saying that they had evidence that she was living with a man. She wasn't. We know that. We used to visit the home to help her regularly. She did have a son who was, I think, about 16 or 17 and quite tall. She's still arguing with them. HMRC want to give her the money back, but the people at the other place are having an issue with it. But we've been able to help her out. Our food distribution project is a major help. Sainsbury's, 2 or 3 Sainsbury's stores in the borough take donations on our behalf. And we can give those directly to women who need long-term, because the food bank's brilliant. But from what I'm hoping it's changed, but from what I knew of them, you could only go X number of times. And these are people who need ongoing support. So we do that. There's a woman who used to be here, would only come at night because it was dark for counselling. She had been beaten so badly she'd had to go through facial reconstruction. And she moved on. She went out there. Another woman whose children were taken away from her, had been in prison, was ordered to come here. And then one day I got a phone call from her saying, I've got my kids back. My kids back. And that's just magic. These are not stories we would normally talk about. Nobody knows about us, but that's because we're so busy we can't get out there.
Yeah. So when that happens, you must feel a fantastic sense of achievement that you've been able to help. I noticed that one of the things you say on your website as well, that you try to help women to move towards economic independence so that they can become stakeholders in their own community.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, through the courses that we provide. We don't do vocational training as such, but the confidence building, it's sort of a first stage into going into further training and education. All the confidence building, assertive communication courses, We do one called Exploring Anger, because we think anger is okay sometimes. People have a right to be angry, but it's what you do with that anger that matters, and, impacts on how people treat you. We did, for many years, IT here for beginners. We used to call it IT for phobics. Because a lot of us, I'm still terrified this machine's going to blow up on me every time I switch it on. So,
Join the club.
Digital dinosaur. I'm also in my 70th year, so that excuses me.
So you do all the courses, and
they do the courses. Citizens Advice used to provide sort of economic literacy type stuff as well to help people to deal with stuff, because those are things that they should teach at school.
Yeah,
they don't.
Yeah, they don't.
All the kings and queens are.
Yeah, they don't, and you're right, they should. But you also work with women from ethnic minorities, don't you? I mean, what sort of work do you do with them? Is it about the particular cultural problems they have, English as a second language, or what is it you do?
Well, at the moment, we're about to start some ESOL classes in partnership with the Educational Workers Alliance. I think they're called EWA. Workers Educational Alliance, I'm being corrected here.
Workers Educational Association.
Yeah, it's they're going to be free. The only proviso is that they're not on another ESOL course anywhere else, and it's available also to women without recourse to public funds. We make sure everything we do is available to them. We meet the criteria of the funder if they exclude women with recourse, but we make sure that there's a couple of spaces for those who need it if it's required. Sorry, I need to take a cough.
Okay, I know you've got a cold, so don't worry.
Sorry. I'm not usually shy about talking. I think also, we had one woman who was so under control. She was quite a senior officer in a local statutory organisation. She didn't have her own bank account. Her husband would control all the finances. So through a long period of counselling, she eventually opened up her own account, got a salary paid into that, and found herself somewhere else to live. So that was more than just economic independence. It was she moved out.
So that was quite something. So, if you look back on the last 25 years, what do you think the main changes are that have happened?
There's a perception that because we've got formal equality in terms of legislation, that we have real substantial equality. And I think that's actually a hindrance. So this conceptual equality is an issue for the women who come to us. And what we're trying to do is to help them to understand that it's not the fault of the individual that's in that predicament, but the systems that we live within. You said it first, so I can repeat it. Universal credit has not. That's been a change that has not been for the benefit of people. I'm proud to say that those that we've challenged, Another change is that there's been a rise in people coming with mental health issues. That's across society, it's not just women, but the stresses and trying to live in this sort of society, it's not good for people. I remember someone asked how we could get the maladjusted to adjust to society, and the speaker, wonderful man, said, take a look at that window, who'd want to be adjusted to that? That's lived with me since the early 1980s, that thought. And I think, so helping people to see that having a mental illness is not a negative thing, that a lot of times we talk to people about how to manage anemia, diabetes. They can manage their things. I know a CEO of a multinational corporation, a brand everybody knows, used to, at 7 o'clock every day, go to his room, whether he was at a conference, he'd go to his and just sit and talk to his voices. That would get him through his problems, So we all find different ways to deal with it. And mental health. They call it depression, low mood now. I mean, okay, it's not personal, is it? No. Hard living with that banner of living with mental health problems because of how it's been over the millennia.
So do you think mental health
have that?
Yes. So do you think mental health is one of the biggest challenges ahead as you move into the future, or are there other big issues you think you're going to have to confront?
I think helping people to survive day to day, women trying to find work, they've, especially mums, it's always been the low paid part-time work. Now it's 0 hours. I mean, duh! How do they survive on that? 1 week they work, 1 week they don't. And it's not that happens. They can get through if we have a system with respect, but they all feel as if they're failing in some way, that they are less of others. And that's the thing I really want to deal with. Their lived experiences, like something that struggling with finances, children, health issues, low-level skills, lack of qualifications, insecure work. Then there's the physical stuff. They've really got a battle, the women that come here. To walk in the door, to actually walk up to this building takes guts.
Yeah. And
you must be desperate. Because it's a tiny little hole. We're trying to pretty it up.
So I mean, you obviously work and you think in the future you're going to have to work more on developing resilience and self-confidence. Now, obviously, you can't do this on your own, and you have a lot of people that help. So, if you are to carry on the great work you do, what is it you most need in the future? Is it volunteers? Is it people with special skills? Or is it something else?
What would help us most? Funds, of course. Funding has been a nightmare. We've taken 38% cut in funding since 1916. 2160. Oh, God. Wake up, Ginny.
1960.
2016. 1960, yeah. I was a child.
Yeah.
Just. Yeah. So, that's a lot of money to lose. We've lost people with that. To get funds from major trusts, you need to have a reserve. When you've lost that much of your funding and you're still just continuing at the level of activity you were, you're in fact having to deal with more because you're getting more and more referrals. We get heaps of people referred to us and significantly from the statutory sector who have also lost funding and people. And, it's really hard. Somebody needs to look at what's going on, the bigger picture.
And what about volunteers?
Volunteers, we need volunteers, thank you. We need day and evening reception. We need counsellors. We need people with proven admin experience, gardeners, fundraiser, anyone who can write a bid or anyone who knows how to inveigle a couple of million at someone, but with the pounds. We need those sort of people. People who could do the sort of personal development courses that we want to run. It was a sad day when Val Bean retired and moved off to Derbyshire. Not forgiven her for that.
Well,
Don't like change.
Well, you should let them know that. Okay, so
I will do.
We're sort of coming to the end of this set now.
Hey!
She has. If people wanted to help out, if they wanted to get in touch with you, if they wanted to get involved in all the incredible things that you do, what do they do? Who do they get in touch with? Where do they go?
Okay, they can contact us via the message thing on Facebook. I love computers and I'm beginning to enjoy Facebook. Then they can also email us. I don't know if the info at enfieldwomen.org.uk website, Facebook email address works. And they could phone, but sometimes because there are so few of us, I'm in this room and the phone is some 8 meters away. And with my mobility, it took me a while to get there, so that they've often hung up by the time I get there. So if they can do the email, more likely they'll get a speedy response. They do get the answering machine. Leave a message. We will call you back. We need people to help out at events. Christmas, we're going to be in Enfield town, and we want people who are good at getting people to part with money for things like tombolas and stuff. It's going to be fun stuff.
Okay. All right. So if anybody wants to get in touch, then please do, and be persistent. Keep the phone ringing so Ginny can get to it and other people can answer. That would be great. Well, thanks for doing this, Ginny, because I know you do some fantastic work, and I know you were a bit wary about doing this interview with the code you've got, but you've done really well, and you've got through it, with flying colours. So thanks for doing it. And I hope people do get in touch with you, and I hope they do help and and develop, the work you do in a much broader way, with the problems that you have described so well that women are going to face in the future. So thank you very much for doing this. And we'll end this webinar interview now.